Welcome to Mental Health Monday with the lovely Anna, and I am Bryon. And today we start off with season two. We have made it to season two. We had a really nice chat the last episode on recapping everything that we went through in season one and how much it kind of just meant to us and how much you guys mean to us as well. So when we get into today, we're going to get into season two and we're going to be talking about attachment, nervous system, and relational dynamic. But I'm going to throw it over to the lovely Anna, and she'll get us started today.
Thank you, Brian. Have you ever experienced being, I guess, really at peace with somebody in somebody's presence and then, very anxious around another person?
Where we're finding out why we're responding in the ways we do with certain people in all sorts of situations, whether it be romantic, work, or just friendship. Definitely how we'll start to get into this is attachment theory. We're biologically wired for connection. We're wired for connection. We have those from an early age, obviously. And then as we get older, those relationships get more complicated and it influences us and how we communicate, how we deal with situations, and how we can expect to deal with those expectations of having relationships. I tend to be that same way.
So, attachment theory is essentially, like you're saying, we're biologically wired for connection. Years. So, if somebody's consistently showing up for us, say like a caregiver, then we learn that that connection is safe. That's what our nervous system is telling us. If it is inconsistent or absent, then our nervous system is saying you can't count on this connection through attachment theory as we get older and we learn about them. So, it's not a fixed state or a personality. We are not a specific kind of attachment.
I can be where I feel. And when we really look back on a lot of it, it stems from, our interactions as we grow into being ourselves as we get older and we find out like, hey, like, not everything is based on trauma, but we have some bad relationships. So those kind of carry with us and we get anxious when we have to try to let new people in, or, you had some bad bosses and you're feeling, a little anxious around just a new boss because of past experiences. So we yearn for those connections, but this is where we can kind of find out why and where we can feel better about making everything a little bit more of a level playing field. So
Yeah. Yeah. So I know just like one example for me, one of my past relationships was he was very critical of me. He had very high expectations of himself and high expectations of everybody around him. And, that can be a good thing and also a very stressful thing for people. And I noticed that, and so I had that experience. And then I noticed in a boss relationship I had in recent years that he was also the same way. And, just getting to learn him a little bit better and learn, kind of where he was coming from, his expectations, his intention on different things made a huge difference. And that, while I guess knowing that made me a little bit easier for me to understand and to not take it personally and to be a little bit less anxious because I knew that he was coming from a place of trying to help me to be better, to help me improve. So he was very critical in that way. So it was coming more from a place of love, even though it was very critical, but it made me a little bit less anxious that way. So, having those conversations with somebody that, you may have a little bit of tension in that relationship really and you're both actively working on that to come in the middle to meet in the middle that really helps to aid those different kinds of relationships.
yeah, and I think it's really important what you said there, just in the sense of how we see people and see connections through past connections and how things trigger us. That is a true thing. It takes us to a place with our body not even, knowing like subconsciously, like, hey, I'm in, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode in a way with people because I'm reacting and figuring out like, hey, this reminds me of somebody that was in my life previously, and this is putting my guard up and I'm having to act differently, or hey, this seems familiar. So your body reacts to those in that same manner without even thinking. It's just like the natural reaction to just jump to one big thing you said was communication. And then you kind of understand that other person. Because one thing in this life that we live through is we can't change other people. And if they are a certain way, that's where we have to find out like if the chemistry is there, the compatibility where, sometimes those people are forced to be in your life, but then you got to figure out where you can come in comfortably and be able to have that without making it your life bad. But one big key to that is communication. So for you to take the time and kind of figure out where they're coming from so you don't have to correlate it exactly with the previous situation. It actually is going to help you tremendously in the sense of being able to see the compatibility and see, oh, well, this is kind of what they are, but they are expecting something high of me. I'm not seeing it that way. Sometimes criticism, like, I know I'm guilty of it, of just feeling like that I'm not good enough. As soon as I hear criticism, I'm not good enough. Like, I just suck, whatever, we're going. And when we were talking about subconsciously having those types of situations where we fall back into, hey, this seems familiar and we need to get out of that. But communication and able to speaking with the other person and understanding where they come from. At the end, we can't control other people. And at the same time, a lot of times when we have conflict or situations that we can't avoid, it is best to have communication, which is uncomfortable and hard at times, but it's very important to have conversations because the only way that we can truly get along with other people and really have solid relationships is to understand each other. And as much as we avoid it because we don't like it and things like that, we have to come into that whole compatibility and just chemistry thing. And we've got to really find out if we can work together because that's the best part about, having connections and being attached to somebody, our friendships, our coworkers, family, everything else. We kind of have to learn where, not where the line is, but where, like, hey, how do we meet best and where can we meet together where it's going to work out better? We have to have communication to open it up so that you can understand them and then they can understand you. And even if you don't see it eye to eye, you're still going to see that just having that conversation is going to see, like in your case, okay, well, this person isn't just like somebody in my past. It is literally just like they want the best for me. And now I understand that. So I'm not going to have to react and have that sort of reaction and feeling towards this person because I've given the chance to really find out where they stand or where they are and what they stand for and why they are feeling this way and why I feel this way. So I think it's just important to really put that out there so we can have the dialogue or at least like understand somebody just a little bit better. You don't have to ask or get into deep questions if it's not a personal relationship and things like that, but just maybe, hey, like where are you coming from? I see you giving me a lot of criticism, and then I just want to be better in the situation where I'm not feeling so worthless or under, appreciated or under working for you as a boss because I need to find out what your expectations are and where I don't want to feel like I can't do this because I know I can, because that's definitely something that I worry about with criticism that I have to reassure myself like, hey, I am good enough. I don't just criticism, but like as people that are sensitive and neurodivergent, like it is very hard to take criticism a lot of the time because we instantly go to a place where like, oh, yep, not good enough. This, and then it stresses us out to a new level. But if we really took the time to communicate, it really helps understand people and understand what people are saying.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the communication creates an opportunity for greater understanding, for sharing points of view, because we each have our own lens, like you're saying, that we are seeing through, that we experience life through. So we're each coming with our own viewfinder, so to speak, and so we can share that information with one another, promote a greater understanding to be able to come in the middle and compromise and work better together. And there's a lot of different nuances in relationships, obviously, but that's saying that like compatibility and capacity, three C's. So I mean, we may have chemistry with somebody, like using a work scenario. I may really relate and like this person a whole lot as a connection, as a friend. I like their personality. I think they're fun to be around, but we may not work very well together. They may have a completely different working style than I have, and they like a romantic relationship. I may really like how a person is, how they present themselves, enjoy being around them, but they may live a completely different lifestyle that doesn't mesh well with mine. And then there's also capacity too. only have different points of our life, and that can change pretty quickly with whatever we have on our plate. We may have more capacity in our vessel, in our internal and external, to be able to take on different roles and responsibilities, and that can fluctuate over time. We may not always have the capacity, or as I like to say in the corporate world, bandwidth to have a good committed relationship, but that may change quickly with different life changes. So a lot of different nuances there, and to think about, when you talk about inconsistency, we may end up thinking about them more frequently, ironically enough. And we might crave that reassurance, like you're talking about, because we want to feel good. We want to feel like we are accepted by that person. And we may interpret that unpredictability as excitement, depending upon, what our relationships may have looked like modeled to us by caregivers and other significant experiences in our life.
Yeah, I think what jumps out to me is just subconsciously. I mean, middle child syndrome and everything else that I've been grown and like forged in this universe that we're in, and the ways of me being myself is definitely craving reassurance. I totally have had this in relationships, romantic relationships. I was craving that because I wanted to have control in the sense of like, hey, I want to know I'm doing good. Hey, I want to know, like, like if things blow up, like this is exciting or something, but like it's not me consciously thinking that way or knowing that I'm having this kind of reaction to a person that may be inconsistent or something like that. It's just me knowing or seeing or gathering that type of relationship throughout my life that somehow I crave that. And that's definitely like where I am, and life's gotten better since I've realized that I don't need to blow it up per se, or have these people that are inconsistent to really keep my life good or spicy or anything, because I started to realize like, hey, you're kind of craving chaos with people that aren't really on your level, and you're really going after the people that are inconsistent. And then when you don't hear these reassurance things and all these things that we kind of crave to get in line and get in sync, and that we don't have to worry as much, which, will bring us to the attachment styles. Cause I know for a fact, I have an anxious attachment style. It was real bad for a while where, like, oh, they didn't text back. I'm really anxious about it. And like, hey, like, did I do something wrong when I didn't do anything wrong? And, should I send another message? Or are they like just not getting it? All these other places that have been so hard for me as somebody that craves reassurance. I really used to give a lot of my time to people where they didn't see it for that, and they didn't know what anxious attachment was, in the sense of I didn't even know at the time. And finding that out and being able to self soothe and do these things that we talked about in prior episodes about, really like centering myself and bringing myself down to earth. It's very big. It's one of those energy things where if we're giving ourselves out so much energy and we're really like worrying about these things that we really can't control, we're really just doing a disservice to ourselves. And like a lot of people can't help it because this is just how we kind of grew up and how we kind of got molded from what we saw around us, or how we dealt with situations. And that's, we didn't weren't taught any other way. Or luckily for a newer generation and younger people have outlets and material and podcasts like this where they can go, like, I see myself doing that too, where we didn't really have that much going on until, as of late. It really is helpful to do homework and to do these things to find out. Like, I didn't know what a anxious attachment was. Like, that was just like, oh, that was me. I don't know. Just I have OCD and, ADHD. I, depressed, all these other things. I just felt like that was just the normal thing until I read about, hey, like attachment theory. And then you find out there's multiple different attachment styles. And then that's where you have to like say, hey, like, who matches this? What kind of compatibility do we have? Like, is it just like chemistry? Like, is the excitement of them not being available all the time? Is this what I'm attracted to? Or is it like, hey, I can give myself some peace if I find somebody that understands my anxious style and can give me a reassurance without me even asking, because I'm verbalizing and communicating those things that I need to kind of say, hey, this is how I am and this is what I need back. And then once you kind of get that and you get in with the right people, it builds out, and you can just, you're not on eggshells all the time. You're not anxious.
I think about a year or two ago, and most of my life, I thought I was pretty securely attached. I didn't have the language for that, but I was like, oh, yeah, I'm pretty cool. I'm pretty fine with my different relationships. But then reflecting back and learning about the different attachment styles, I saw that I was in certain relationships, like with family, friends, certain romantic relationships I'd had in the past. But then in other romantic relationships, I was absolutely anxious. And it was that combination of the two of us in that dynamic where it was somebody that was inconsistent. And that inconsistency that really prompted me to think, well, what's going on? And I didn't do the best to communicate those kinds of things and say, hey, what's going on? I did to a point, but I could have done so more clearly and realized, then in over the course of different other ones that were similar, that, it was creating a dynamic that wasn't really healthy for me. But, we live and we learn and we can adjust these things. And then, and that's where it's like, not only having the language and working on ourselves and doing the reflection time internally and as well as with a therapist or trusted people in our lives, but also having other relationships, say like a romantic relationship modeled where we have somebody that comes into our life that is consistent and dependable, and we can kind of rewrite that story now that we know not only the language, we've done some of the internal work in any kind of relationship. So I may not have a romantic relationship, but I have trusted friends and family members, other people in my life that I can practice these different things with to see, okay, yeah, it's not necessarily me all the time. I can recognize that and be like, that's that you're feeling anxious again. Why? And we can learn to stop and pause and to rewrite that script. There are a couple of different other attachments. I mentioned secure, dismissive, avoidant is really, the feeling more so than others when you are starting to get close with somebody. And I don't want to depend on anyone, having that complete independence. And that's really your nervous system saying, you may have learned that dependence feels risky or that vulnerability comes with a cost.
I just want to point it out there that, feeling secure is something that can happen over time. So if you become somebody like myself that is anxious and has anxious relationships, it is okay to get to a point where you feel secure. That's kind of what we want. It's deceiving, and we also had the anxious, which I talked about, which is just like you're feeling on edge all the time. And it takes a special partner or friends or coworkers to really work with you in these senses, but you have to communicate, and that's where we preach the talking and talking out loud so that people can understand you a little bit better. And then being dismissive is just, people are like that, that people have learned through subconscious of just, hey, I don't deal with stuff. I just need time, and I'm dismissive of everything, and I'm just gonna get out of here and really just like peace out. Like that's my style. And I've definitely been around those people, and it's hard as somebody that's anxious that has somebody that can just be like, yeah, I'm out. Like, and then no follow up there. But we really get into fearful, avoidant, and disorganized attachment. And those people generally, closeness. Now that I'm getting it, I feel like I'm running away. Like they're getting a little overloaded from something they think they want. They want a lot, and then as soon as they get it, they back up because that's kind of, they're not sure. They're in the middle. They're disorganized. That's part of the attachment style, and it's something I can relate to too. I mean, sometimes you jump all in and then you're like, holy, whoa, you know what I mean? And then you're kind of becoming this kind of attachment because you're like, hey, been down this road before, I want connection, but I don't want to get hurt. There is a lot of that happens, which is totally normal. It's normal to feel any type of these connections, but when you find your base level connection, that's what this is for. Just like in season one, where we're saying do your homework, this gives you a path to kind of go down because they give you parallels of like, hey, if you're anxious attachment, this is kind of your neck of the woods, giving you some solid terms and definitions so that we can say, hey, I lean more towards this. And then we can find where we can go down that lane and find where, like, hey, generally this is what people need. Like me being an anxious, connection is going to have more reassurance in somebody that's secure. And if we're not on the same understanding and having that open communication for that, then it's really just going to be like, right, like I'm just feeling not, cared for, but it's not that I'm not cared for. It's because I'm not opening up my communication so they can understand what I need and what my needs are. And that's what a lot of we do with this mental health game is what we find out is we're not sharing enough to get what we need, and we get upset, we get anxious, and we get overwhelmed when we're not getting what we need, but we forget that we're not communicating those needs. So when we have all these different attachment styles, it's really what it is. It's a miscommunication. And then that miscommunication is probably just not enough or not having the right communication to let each other in any sort of friendship, relationship, work, social settings. We really just got to tell people and those around us what we need and what we're capable of giving.
Yeah.
As we said earlier in this episode, is like we crave connection. And when we get into like more in depth relationships, wherever it lay land on what they are, we really need to be, transparent on what we need because we can't just be doing everything for everybody else and then not getting our needs met. That's how we blow up. That's how we have meltdowns and everything else because we're giving all of our energy and not asking for anything back, where typically like somebody like myself will feel guilty for asking for something back. But the real thing is that I'm sure whoever's in your life that you're close to wants to give back. And it's not a you feeling guilty about asking for something. It's really just like a hey, I'm doing a lot and I need a little bit back. And this is what I'm lacking, and this is why I feel like I'm about to explode or like have a meltdown is because I'm not getting these things, and maybe I'm not communicating them right, and then you get to have more serious conversations. So
Yeah. Yeah. And it can go the opposite way too. Sometimes, we have to really be bird's eye view of ourselves and our actions and our relationships to see are others giving more to me than I'm actually giving to them? Am I showing up for people just as much as they're showing up for me? Do I have the capacity to do that now? Do I need to have a conversation with them? Be like, hey, I love you, but I can't right now. I can't give you much of my time and attention right now, but I would like to, and let's work on this. There's a lot of different dynamics there. And, with any of this stuff too, it's not like you're saying, these are all things that we can fix. A lot of what we may have experienced in our earlier years, it may have been unconscious, or it may have been something that we had very little control over. We were adapting to a situation, thinking about a child, but it's something that we can control. Once we review it, we assess it, and we can start to take small steps here and there to, really ask for what we need and to give others as well. And you're talking about, like expressing to people, what we need. I just immediately thought about children, if they oftentimes, like maybe what they're upset about isn't like the actual thing that they're showing. They may be upset because they had to share a toy, or they had to, somebody, what, there's a situation where another kid was getting more attention, blah, blah, blah. But underlying, it just meant to them something else. So, they're not as good as good with expressing themselves as to what exactly they may need. So you kind of have to go and ask some questions and get to the root cause of it. And we have to do that with ourselves because we're really just children internally trying to express, hey, this feels crappy and I want to feel better and I want to connect. We need that connection. And so, yeah, if you think about, when we're talking to somebody, we're talking to their younger version as well. And it gives us a little bit of grace for ourselves and others.
it's that word again, grace. Got to give ourselves grace and other people grace. I think that's very important, especially when we're discussing this, is understanding that, as we're getting to know ourselves and to really better figure ourselves out, not everybody's doing the same on the opposite end of who we're communicating with. So we always have to kind of be a little bit understanding that we can't just be like, hey, I'm working on myself. Why aren't you? Sometimes we have that desire to kind of butt in and be, I'm really putting in the work and stuff. But the reality is, wherever your star map leads you to by doing this work, it kind of starts to show you what you need really and what you're capable of doing. So it does lead us in uncomfortable situations where we find out if compatibility is real or we're just wanting something off a base chemistry only, and we start to really find out some uncomfortable things and some real comfortable things because then you start to say, hey, like it's not the best, but maybe if you can see it for what it is a lot better is what I think I'm trying to say with that. You just you'd be able to see things a little bit clearer and it's not something we fix instantly and all this other stuff. When we say grace, we mean like let them be them and let you be you, but you gotta figure out you because that's the biggest part. We always come back to there's only one person that you can really control, and that's yourself. So if you put yourself in position to do the figuring out and to find out like, hey, why am I feeling this way? We talked about the freeze, fight, flight, and fawn, and that's really where the nervous system and like where we're feeling like safety in relationships. We find these attachment styles so that we can say, hey, like these are reactions, knee jerk reactions to, hey, I'm generally anxious. So like when I'm in conversations with certain people, I'm anxious. So we find those connections and we just want to be able to like, understand them better, especially with, as I've had to find out that why am I so anxious all the time? Or like why am I anxious with like my bosses and stuff? Once you kind of dig and find that out, you're like, oh, well, you can't live in that image and you can't live in that sort of world, but as you said, like talk to your inner child and kind of heal them in a way of being like, hey, we're going to live our own life and we're going to be who we can be and we can be okay with that instead of feeling like we're in the shadow of somebody or like trying to figure out that type of area of where it's subconsciously us being a certain way. So it's worth it to figure out how we relate these attachment styles to our own life and why and unmask those things and kind of as we're talking to somebody's inner child as our inner child, if we're in a better state because we learned about ours and we can say, hey, we're then going to give that back to whoever we're communicating with. So we want to become safe in relationships with people. And it really starts with us because we're not going to be able to be feeling safe with them if we're not feeling safe with ourselves or at least understanding ourselves and why we get to these places.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said there. It's like we have to be able to give to ourselves. And that's one of the ways to help to heal these different things too, is you know, it builds that trust in ourselves. The consistency of small acts of taking care of ourselves builds that trust. And the same thing that it does with others. So, really relational safety is consistency. So, consistently showing up, consistently being there when they need you. That doesn't mean that, like, you're able to do it all the time, like every single instance, but, how consistent are we? How emotionally available are we to them? If somebody comes to us with a problem and they want to try to open up, then are we able to listen? Or do we just say, hey, I'm sorry, I can't deal with this, and we run away? If there's conflict at any time, big or small, are we able to repair after that? Accountability, being accountable to ourselves, being accountable to others, communication, and predictability. I know I have several good friendships that, all these different aspects are modeled in them. I'm able to know that, we may not be like the absolute best of friends, but I know that I can count on them if ever I were to need anything. And they're consistently there for me if I need them. And if something were to happen, we would work through it. We talk through it. I feel safe and comfortable enough to be like, "Hey, had a little disconnect there. What was going on?" And have that conversation, and we would both be fine after it, and we would continue to move on in that relationship. So really, that's kind of what we're seeing as far as relational safety in any kind of relationship.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that when we dig deeper into these attachment styles and the dynamics of a relationship, when we find out people may not be who we need them to be, and communicating what we need, and then we finding out it doesn't mean the person that we're dealing with is bad or anything, or like this devastating and they just aren't who I thought they were. No, you just really find out like, hey, what am I compatible with? It's really just like some people just aren't built for each other and you find that out no matter if it's friendship, romantic or work related or just society. Like sometimes people just don't work together and as much as other things click when you really get down to the real conversations and the real talks and conflict's a really big one. If you have conflict with anybody, how that gets resolved and how each one of you communicates after, if you can't get back to a peaceful place, you have to dig deeper and you have to find out how you can get there, what shows me is a really solid, relationship in any sort of field is like if there is a conflict, how well do we come back and have a better conversation and be able to have like it how much it bothers us. It's just like how much does it damage our relationship? Are we able to get back to square one? We don't even have to get back to square one, but how are we going to level out and have so many great relationships in my life that I'm pretty happy to say, like, there's some people that I don't really generally talk to anymore because of things like that. If we had a conflict, we just couldn't get to back to square one and then have these other relationships that we can be angry with each other 1 minute and then be like, but I love you so much. And, and then they're just like, yeah, yeah, we're good. It's just not seeing things eye to eye, and that's really what comes down to because then you're finding the right people to surround yourself with. When you're chasing that argument or chasing that conflict because that's what you're used to, that's what we talked about, our system's reactions to all this stuff. If we crave that, we're gonna go after that. But when we start to, like, dial that in and be like, "Hey, that's it's not healthy to be chasing the person that's inconsistent and everything like that. Like we're here to like make connection and have good connection. And then I don't have to feel so drained even if there's conflict. And that's where we find ourselves communicating and then it's where we find ourselves looking inward and trying to find out, hey, like we're feel like this is good for me. This is a good relationship to put my time into. And that's, we're lucky as having a group of people that, they all have different things they offer us and we have different things we offer them and they're going to be there because they can see we have good communication. Just going to blurt out a bunch of stuff, just need somebody to hear it today and they're going to say, "Yep, we love you." And in whatever way, not even those words they're saying back, but we still feel it because, we found really solid relationships, but it's through adversity and through finding bad relationships and kind of weeding them out. And it's not like you don't have to have those relationships with people. You just have to find out how much you're willing to give to those relationships. And that's where this all kind of connects together is that we find out more about ourselves so that we can come into any situation knowing, hey, this serves me, this doesn't serve me, and I'm chasing something and I don't know why. Oh, let's look into it. So we find out about ourselves so where we can be better in relationships where we don't have to do that and we can self-soothe and self-regulate. And but it's so helpful to know where we land in a lot of these ways of having attachment styles and really just finding ourselves through relationships and having good times, bad times, because we're always going to have both, but be able to get through the bad times and have even more good times because hey, like we've learned to work well with others, right? So it's a really big help.
Yeah, yeah. What I heard there too was, around you could tell is a good relationship for well, one of the aspects of a good relationships for us is that our nervous systems soften. Now that doesn't mean that they soften, it's always comfortable for us, but that we feel that we can trust them. They're consistent and we can trust them. We could be ourselves around them. Even emotionally safe relationships, they can challenge us and sometimes challenge us in very good ways because, inviting accountability and growth. Those are both things that are not easy. Being, accountable to the other person, being consistent, growing in any way, change. That's very uncomfortable. But I think about like a coach in that scenario. If you have a good coach, a good advisor, instructor, you may not feel like completely at home with them, but you may feel more comfortable in the fact that you know that you can trust them. You trust their advice and you trust that they want the best for you. So you relax in the fact that you can count on them for that. And it encourages us to grow. So, really, a healthy relationship is one that can withstand, the honesty, communication, and repair, and as well as, holding each other accountable.
Yeah, it's about breathing easier when you're around people. We have a group in particular, shout out Mac and Cheese, that really sees us. And that's something that I preach. Just being seen and heard is generally what we want in life. And when we get those things, we feel unstoppable, feel on top of the world. We also feel like we can be ourselves. And that's where these safe relationships come from, is kind of, hey, if we have a falling out, I still see you. I think there's very strong words in what you were saying about just having the ability to be ourselves, no matter what that looks like. And then we grow from that because we have relationships that challenge those things because they're like, hey, I still see you and I know who you are. And then those relationships help you grow from that, where you're like, what are you talking about? And then, hey, what do? We think about things, right? We take the time, we serve ourselves, we think about these things, and we start like putting it in perspective. What ourselves are is every sort of emotion and every sort of way that we can really be the human that we are. We have faults, we have great qualities. We're going to exude those at different times. We're going to have different reactions and different things. The people that see us and support us are going to challenge us to grow because they're going to know like it's okay for us to grow and evolve and everything else. But we never lose ourselves because they see us. And that's the biggest part of like what we do for ourselves. And we try to cultivate like these relationships and become more secure around people so that we can be silly, dumb, emotional, mad, everything else. But if we're really just showing up instead of not showing up or just being in the background or just kind of, going through the motions, not really expressing ourselves, they don't get to know us. And that's really how we really feel where we can grow and you feel safe in a space to grow. And that's what any relationship from work, romantic, friendship to social, if you feel safe with people is when we become closer, but we have to open up and, build these relationships to be able to get that far. So we can't expect things overnight and we can't be worried about being perfect, never being triggered, never struggling. We're really giving the chance to have, emotion regulation and accountability on both ends of the situation where we can have flexibility and we can tolerate discomfort. It's really just about trying to find the consistency with people.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you tie that in because absolutely, if we open up to folks, we are allowing them to help us in our times of need and vice versa. I help other people when I get to know them better. If I see that they have emotional anxiety or social anxiety, or they get really anxious around larger groups or, certain scenarios where there's a lot of people, it can be very overwhelming and they can get overstimulated. And if I know that about them, then I can help to either, get into a different environment or to make them feel more comfortable in that environment and vice versa too. So if somebody sees that, knows that, okay, I have, I may not like certain loud noises, and this environment has a lot of these loud noises. They are able to help make me more comfortable, need to assist the situation, especially if I don't have them, I can't do that myself. We're able to help each other out when we know what each other needs. Thinking about it too in a food aspect, if I know that somebody has a gluten allergy, I can make sure to have gluten free foods there for them. If you don't share that information, then you're not going to have the best of time at a place. So these are things that, we don't have to like share everything about ourselves, but just to be able to open up and make ourselves available to others and have some trusted people around us if you also don't give some yourself. So we're able to work on that balancing of scales to help one another better that way.
Yeah, and something you said resonated really big to me because there is something about my personality and who I am. It's always my duty in life to try to make people feel good, even if they're not going to be in the best situation that they are going to feel in. But it's just all about being seen, and that's what this life's about. It's being seen for the person that you really are. And we really do a disservice to ourselves when we expect to do it, but we don't try or we don't like vocalize that like this is what I expect or this is what I need in this situation. And as somebody that really took time and found out that I was expecting a lot from so many people without voicing one word of communication of what I needed, I just didn't even know how to begin with and then go, oh, I expected so much without even saying words to know that I was expecting anything. So really what it breaks down to is our nervous system. And it's just like it's really just trying to protect us, even when, the strategies that they learned are no longer the ones that we want to rely on, like the tiger chasing us in the woods. We don't need to be in that state of mind all the time. We just need to find like food and things to feed us, but we find out a different way to, relate ourselves and calm ourselves. But awareness allows us to choose which version we can cultivate. And the goal isn't to become an expert at labeling yourself like I'm just anxious and that's it. It's to understand your patterns well enough to build a healthier relationship with yourself and with the people around you. Because security isn't perfection. It's not about like, hey, like I know myself, it's good. Because trust me, I know myself is not good in that way of like, it's a work in progress. As mental health is always, it's always a work in progress. So we build healthier relationships with ourselves and others. We just have to choose the relationships that we involve ourselves in, but we're also choosing what our nervous system has to experience. If we're not surviving in certain relationships, we're not feeding ourselves or feeding them, and it's doing is wearing us down, and our batteries are going real low all the time. There's gotta be change there, and you gotta see that, and that's where we, like, choose ourself, and it's hard and it's uncomfortable, but, like, we start to choose where our nervous system gets to go in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
There's situations that we can choose to be in and choose not to be in. So we start to say, "Hey, I need to change something here," and that's kind of where we can take everything that we talked about today and kinda dig deeper on ourselves to find out, "I am like this, and this person, this relationship, this situation doesn't feed me, it's really just draining me. And unless
Mhm.
I fix how much I interact with that, it's still going to drain me. So at the end of the day, we're just trying to get our battery to be not drained all the time. We have so much to worry about as humans that we can start to build our life to be better by choosing and really focusing in on these things where we can give less to situations while giving more to ones that feed us more. It's all about just trying to find the happy medium of like, we don't need to change overnight, but we can like incrementally change. Let's get more to my friends. Let's like give more to them because they're feeding me. You know what I mean? Instead of going to this one relationship that's just like 70-30, and then I'm getting 30 back. It's just not serving me, you know? So maybe less attention to that is going to build you up to be better and have a better overall time while we experience this craziness, the thing called life for sure.
All this is just an experiment too. We may not know from the very beginning just how somebody will or won't show up for us when we start to interact with them. And that may change over time too, just how much somebody does and doesn't show up for us. But and we can have a conversation with them about it, and if things start to change, then okay, we can assess. Sure, I'm gonna stay here, and I can give this amount of time and energy, or it may be something like you said we need to walk away from. We can also assess our patterns. Assess other relationships over time too to see, is there a pattern? Have I chosen mostly partners that are detached, that are only showing up for me part of the way? How am I showing up in the relationship? Because we play a part in it too. If especially if we stay in relationship with people that aren't really giving us what we need, even after communicating, after showing up and after doing our part, we have to we have to assess that. And then vice versa too. Are other people showing up for us and we're not showing up for them? What patterns could there be with that? That's where we can really see, how can I change? How can I show up as a better person? How can I choose better? What kinds of things do I want? What kinds of things do I need? What does that look like? And it's not going to be perfect. Like you're saying, it's not going to be perfect. And we'll make mistakes along the way. We're imperfect. We're human. But those little things that we do, those little micro changes and the stepping outside of our comfort zone and adjusting in better ways that tend more towards meeting our needs and meeting people's needs that are showing up for us. That's where real change begins to compound in a very good way, and we start to see improvement.
Yeah, definitely. I think once we start to realize that we're doing things in a positive way, as I always say, like any work in mental health and any work that you're doing for yourself is work that is beneficial. No matter where it leads you, you're still taking time out to do for yourself. And once you're doing that, you're already doing more than you were before. Nothing changes right away, nothing like happens right away. But all these things that we can do and like really take time for ourselves is the exciting part about mental health. Where like we can figure things out, we can find out our homework, and we can look through things and why we're like this and like what's going on, and really read into things because the best offense is a good defense, as I've said many sports references. We start to, slow down, zoom out, and control what we can control, but also let's work on ourselves. Let's make this body that we're in and life that we're living a little bit more in our favor and not in a selfish way, in a way that we can just know that we can go another day with a little bit of a better foot forward. So, with that being said, today's been a lovely episode, but we're going to throw it, and it's been a lovely first episode of season 2. And I'm going to throw it back over to Anna, and she's going to give us a little bit of a heads up of where we're going to go in the next episode.
Yes, yes. So, next episode, we are going to be talking about boundaries in friendships, family, and work. So, we talked a little bit about boundaries before, but we're going to dive a little deeper into that, what they may look like in those different dynamics. And, just to kind of close it off here, really, like you're saying, it all comes down with today's topic about our nervous systems. Everything really comes back to our nervous system. And it's really just trying to protect us, even when the things that we learned may no longer be what we want to rely on or what we want to carry on in our adult lives. But once we take the time to reflect and see, okay, do I need change in my life? Am I getting what I need from my different relationships? Am I giving, excuse me, to others what they've communicated, what they need? Then we can see, okay, yes, we may need some change in our lives if that's not the case. And just some things to reflect on is thinking back, okay, what relationships make in my life right now make me feel the safest? What do they look like and why? How does that safety feel in my body? What kinds of things make me feel safe? And knowing too that there's a lot of nuance there too. So some of the things that may feel familiar may not always be what's best for us. And some of the relationships that we may have been choosing over the years and what we may have currently is that what our nervous system is saying feels safe because it may be familiar.
Yeah, definitely. I think what you said is very important. It's just more about what we can do to succeed, make this tough existence be a little bit lighter and a little bit easier, and we don't have to rely on our nervous system that can most of the time, some of the time, lead us in the wrong direction because they want us to feel safe in the areas. And a lot of the times what our nervous system tells us to do is familiar situations, and when one is full of trauma or situations that have gone bad, it's going to lead us to those directions because we're used to those situations. And this is the rewiring process of being able to not have to go and follow our nervous system in those danger zones that they take us back to because we know what heartbreak feels like, or confrontation, or bad relationships. So what really stands out is just to have the introspective of trying to figure out, why we are the way we are so that we can lead ourselves in a better direction as we move forward and with a better moving forward. So as for the lovely Anna and for myself, this has been Mental Health Monday. And we, again, are not professionals. We are just normal human beings going through life and have experienced things in our many moons on this planet that we can share with you guys. As we move into season two, we'll get a little bit more personal, but also just keeping sure we keep the conversation of mental health alive and fluent and very easy to digest because we want to be relatable. And that's what we do here in Mental Health Monday. So until next time, take care of yourself and take care of others and really just smile because you deserve it.
Bye. Take care.
Got it. We're going.